My name's Hi everyone. My name is Ali Abdi. I'm a community organiser with Citizens UK, but I'm based in Wales, so with Citizens Wales, and a lot of my organising takes place in the south of Wales, in Cardiff, and I'm a community organiser there. And I'm really delighted to be here this morning with you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amina. I'm a volunteer with Citizens UK. I've been working with them for about 2 years. I am a former University of Birmingham student, and I'm currently training to be a primary school teacher with Teach First.
Great. So you'll be hearing from my colleagues a bit later when we get into breakout groups and look at some of the tools. I got into this work straight after being a student union sabbatical officer. And it's been a real education and development of my sort of campaigning interest, being able to work as a community organizer. And the more I do this work, the more I see opportunities and spaces for what we do at Citizens UK to support and influence the kind of things that you will be doing in your students' unions. So hopefully this will be of practical use to you. I am going to share my screen because I have a presentation for you. So hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm seeing. And I'm going to play the slideshow now. So hopefully you can see the screen. Thumbs up if you can. Excellent, good. All right then. So I assume that everybody is in this meeting because on some level you're interested in making change happen. And you're from different places and there'll be different circumstances and there'll be different specific things that you're trying to achieve. But everyone here is interested in making some kind of change. There are lots of ways that you as individuals and organizations can try and change things. And community organizing is a particular method and a particular approach to making change. That's how it should be seen. So as we go through these tools, I'm not saying that these are the only ways that you can make change. However, I think that students and students' unions particularly benefit from using this particular approach because it provides additional benefits to students' unions as institutions, and it helps strengthen and make your community more healthy. So on the left-hand side, you can see a list of 3 important words, and these kind of sum up the additional benefits that you and your union will get by using this approach. The first is that by following this approach, you will build stronger relationships within your students' union and your community. You will develop the leadership capacity of people within your community, and your organization or your students' union will gain power. So because of these 3 additional benefits, that's why I'm recommending this particular approach to making change. And there are 3 crucial steps that we're going to be focusing on. The first step is called research. That's about learning about the world, learning about what is going on. That's the first phase. The second phase is about intervening to change the world. And then the third phase is about having an honest assessment of our success and failure. And what I'm going to be sharing with you is essentially a constant cycle of research, action, and evaluation. Each phase is distinct and can be done in a way which ensures that you secure those 3 additional benefits for your group or your organization. And today we're going to have a little bit of time to practice an example relevant to each phase. You can apply this to decolonizing the curriculum, but also you can apply it to all of your student union campaigns. And I very much wish that I had this when I was a student union officer. I think it would have guided me and made me a bit more effective and efficient when I was a sabbatical officer. So let's get into it. The first phase is research. So we think that making change starts with actually learning about the realities of what's going on in the world. And here is a particular approach. I want to start by sharing a bit about me. So I mentioned I'm a former students' union officer. I was president of my students' union in Cambridge about 10 years ago. And that's a core part of who I am and my identity. But I want to share a few other things that are important to me as an individual. I grew up in North London on a council estate. You can see a picture of that on the bottom left. My parents came to this country in the 1980s in order to get university educations. My dad studied at Glasgow and my mother studied at the University of Kent in Canterbury. And they came from Enugu State in Nigeria. So their journey to this country and the life that they built in this country is rooted in the power and the value of education. Those educations allowed them to change their lives in massive ways. They gave them careers and status and money that other people in the place where they grew up did not have access to. My dad was able to work in local government in Enugu State, and my mum was able to work in media and research because of those educations. And so I was raised as somebody who was taught to value education highly, to aspire to have a good education, to work really hard at school, to take things like university really, really seriously and recognize that as being core to my development and what I was capable of doing. That's a big part of me. And I suppose in some way that explains why I care so much about education, why I care about what universities and student unions are doing, and probably explains why I worked hard at school to go to university. And then when I got there, I decided I'd throw myself into university life and get involved in the Students' Union. My family was also very interested in politics, and I was raised in a Christian household, and my family was very, very devout. And so we took issues of social justice very, very seriously too. And so that meant that when I got to university, I was the kind of person who got involved in campaigns and my students' union, and eventually got elected as president. And that experience taught me a huge amount. It showed me the fun and the joy that comes with working together with people and creating new ways to make change. It also showed me the frustrations of being ignored and not listened to by your institution or by the government. The photo at the top is a picture of me with our local MP and a former politician called Nick Clegg. And this was part of a big campaign that we ran at NUS at the time to try and prevent tuition fees for undergraduate education from increasing from £3,000 to £9,000. And that photo is a picture of those two candidates, and they were followed by hundreds of other candidates in that election who committed to not increasing those tuition fees. And we had enough candidates signed up to that pledge to prevent any legislation being passed in Westminster to increase the fees. And then it turned out that that didn't mean anything, and the fees increased, and you guys are probably paying a lot more than what I paid because those politicians went back on the pledge that they made to me and other students. And that experience also taught me a lot because it was frustrating and really demoralizing to work really hard to try and make change and to lose. But it also stirred a real passion and curiosity in me about what makes change possible, what things work and what things don't work. How come the campaign that we ran didn't result in change? How come all the voices behind us weren't powerful enough to make the government listen? And that really fueled my interest in studying and learning about community organising and finding out about Citizens UK. And so I've worked for Citizens UK for nearly 10 years now, initially in London. I worked in Lambeth in South London, and I moved up to Leeds 6 years ago to start our Leeds branch, Leeds Citizens. And I live in Leeds with my wife and my daughter, who I spend most of my time with now. That's a little bit about me. I could say much more. I just want to check from the people in the room if anything that I said in my story connects with your story or resonates with your personal experiences. Those of you who I can see, put a thumbs up if it does, or if you can indicate with a reaction or a gesture on your thing. Okay, a few people have heard things that I've said so far that resonates and connects with you. Okay, so I'm guessing that, yeah, what I said wasn't completely boring. What I'm demonstrating is the first step to research and learning about the world, and the absolute cornerstone of community organising, which is a deep reflection about our own personal stories and why we care about issues, and being able to share that with other people. So I'm glad that you feel that connection, and I hope that people are curious and interested in my story, and if I talked more, I could share more about it. But that's something that all of us have a story, and all of us have an opportunity to reflect on that story and to use that story to connect with others. We use an exercise called the stick person exercise to help us think about our story and understand the things about us that make us who we are, and help us to understand why it is we care about the social change we're pursuing. And it's really, really simple. Literally draw a stick person and reflect on the people that are important to you, the organizations or communities or institutions that are important to you, your hopes and ambitions, the defining moments, you know, the challenges, the choices, the decisions that you've made in your life, which say something about who you are, any anger or fear or injustice that you have experienced, and how you actually spend your time, your energy and your money. And in the conversation that I started, I was getting into all of these sorts of things about myself. You can see that really clearly. So we don't have a huge amount of time in this session, but I wanted to introduce this tool because this is the first step towards you building your power. And I want to give you guys a little bit of time to reflect on that for yourselves. So over the next 3 minutes, you won't have time to reflect on all of these things, but I'd like you to spend a couple of minutes on your own in silence. If you've got some paper, maybe make some notes. And I want you to think about these 2 questions and maybe make some notes about yourself. So the first thing is, where are you from? You know, I want you to think about your background. Where are you from? Who raised you? Who are the most important people in your life? You know, I spoke a bit about my family heritage in Nigeria, how my parents came here, the values I was raised with, the most important people in my life today. So I shared a bit of that myself. And the second thing I want you to reflect on is what experiences, challenges, or choices in your life would help another person to understand who you are and why you care about this issue. So I shared a bit about my parents' journey, the importance of education, the importance of politics, and why that shapes the kind of person I am. So you all have a version of that. I'd like you to spend a couple of minutes thinking about that. Is that okay? Cool. So a couple of minutes just on our own, reflecting on those things. Make notes if it's helpful. Okay, so hopefully some stories and memories are rising to the surface. Maybe you've been able to make a few notes, identify a couple of things which help create the character that you are, have shaped your life, or are behind some of the choices that you've made. Keep those things in mind. We're going to return to them in a second, but I think it's really important that you have the space to reflect on them possibly before we go into our practical exercise. So if community organising is about a constant cycle of research, action and evaluation, learning about the world, intervening to change it, having an honest assessment of our successes and failures, that first phase of research, learning about the world, is partly based on learning about ourselves and about the people that we are working with. If you're in the last session, I spoke about how before you even get into your issues or the action you're trying to make or the change you're trying to do, you need to first start with the question of who are my people? Gathering the group and the team around you who are going to work with you to make change. That's called organized people, and those organized people coming together create a form of power, relational power that comes from relationships. But you're not going to get those deep relationships unless you can exchange your personal stories and have a deeper connection than just kind of small talk and knowing what somebody's name is and maybe what their job title is or what subject they study. It's actually about reflecting on and sharing the mutual interest that you have based on these kind of questions. So that's why we start there, and that's why I've not said anything about decolonization really. I'm really focusing on you for this first phase because that's the order that things get done in community organising. So the purpose of all this reflection is for you to have one-to-one conversations. This is a key tool in community organising that can help you build your team and learn about the sorts of issues that you need to take action on. And the best way to kind of understand and unpick one-to-ones, and the clearest way for you to understand them, is to kind of clarify what they are and what they're not. So a one-to-one conversation, that is kind of a piece of organising jargon, right? You also might have one-to-one conversations in other contexts with work or with study or meeting with a tutor or something like that. So I just want to make really clear, these are a particular type of one-to-one conversation. So what is it not? This is not a quick chat, a superficial discussion about, I don't know, what the weather's like or what happened in the football last week, or how you get onto campus or what your journey was like or anything like that. It's not a quick superficial chat. It's also not an opportunity to sell something. So this is not the conversation which is about, I've got this action, I've got this event, I've got this group, I've got this cause, I've got this issue, and I'm trying to sell that issue to you because it's the most important thing and I need to convince you that it's right, and will you sign my petition, will you come to my meeting, that sort of thing. It's not that conversation. And by the way, I'm not knocking either of those two types of conversations. They're both really, really important. And those of you who are active in your students' union, you need to be good at both types of those conversations, or else things don't function. But I'm just saying in this context, that's not what we're talking about. I'm also not getting into a kind of pastoral or counselling kind of conversation. So by having deep conversations where we're sharing something about our personal story, I am not trying to replace the kind of dedicated, trained support in counselling or student advice or pastoral care or anything like that. This is not something that substitutes for those things. It's also not an interview. It's not a conversation where my job is to hear your story and listen and write it down and dispassionately not reveal anything about myself or extract information from you so that I can take it away and use it for something like that. And it really can't be shortcutted using social media. So this is not about creating a Facebook post to reveal stuff about you or an Instagram live video and getting people to react. It actually has to be done face to face. What I am talking about is a deep relational conversation that takes time and is intentional and scheduled. So it's not just happening in passing. The focus, rather than being on the thing which I'm really excited about or the specific meeting I want you to come to or the cause that I'm righteously angry about, is actually on you and the other person and exploring where you might have a common interest, So you're actually sharing things about your roots, your motivations, your story, your ambitions. These things hopefully do connect to the issue that you care about. And in this case, you know, some of those things are part of the reason why this issue of decolonization is something that matters to you, so much so that you are giving up your time on a Friday morning to come to, you know, a seminar about this issue. But you're starting there with your roots, your motivations, your story, your ambitions, not the specifics of the cause or the particular change. And it's a two-way thing, and it happens face to face. It's not something that happens by text or online. So those conversations are a core skill of community organizing. And as organizers, we schedule them every day with people. And I recommend that those of you who are serious about making change on this issue, you need to create time in your diary to have these conversations. It's easy for me to talk about them, but you will learn best by having one-to-one conversations. So we're going to spend sort of 10 to 15 minutes now practicing these conversations. You won't have enough time to get into everything, but those two questions that we were reflecting on before, I want that to be the basis of your conversations. So in a moment, we're going to divide you into pairs, and you're going to be paired up with somebody. And I'd like you to introduce yourself to that person and to have a conversation with them where you share something about your background or where you're from or who raised you or what the most important people are in your life, and listen to the other person's version of that. And I want you to share an experience or a challenge or a choice you've made in your life that would help the other person understand you better and why this issue of decolonization actually matters to you. So that's it. And just spend 10 to 15 minutes now in pairs discussing that. I don't want to give you any more guidance than that because you're all smart and relational people, and I'm sure you'll learn more from just doing it. Is that okay? Yeah? So Tom, can you divide us up into pairs and give us maybe 12 minutes in our groups? All right, so join the breakout room you've been assigned to, and good luck with your conversations. Hello, is that Liddy? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, Liddy, can you hear me? I think you're on mute.
Oh, hi. Hello.
Hello. You're joining this session. We're in the middle of some breakout groups where we are having one-to-one conversations. So that's why it's just me on this screen. Everybody else is in a pair having a conversation. But thank you for joining. I think in about 5 minutes, they'll be coming back from those conversations. But I can maybe fill you in that time. I can maybe fill you in on where we're up to so far. That's fine. Don't worry about the background noise. That's okay. Yeah. So, Lydia, which university are you from? Birmingham. Great. Okay. Ah, is that JJ?
First of all, I'm sorry for being late today. Like I had kind of nightmare and I overslept.
JJ, that's all right. We're in breakout groups. I think you might have been put.
I know, but I was allocated alone, so
Hello,
I wanted to quit the meeting altogether. But I saw that I can just leave the room.
You can leave the room. Yeah, that's fine. So I don't know why. I've not got control of the groups, but I can see that you were on your own, and there's somebody else called Dylan who's on their own. But I can't get a message to either of you. So it's good that you left. Hopefully Dylan will leave his room and you can be connected. But okay. Liddy has joined us here as well. So Liddy, just so that you're aware, we are looking at some of the key skills of community organising. Were you in the last yesterday's session?
Very briefly.
Were you in yesterday's? So did you see my session yesterday? Okay, I can't hear you. No, okay. Well, my name's Tom. I work for Citizens UK as a community organizer. At the moment, what we've been sharing is some key tools for making change. And I think you can see on the screen, we're basically going through this cycle of research, action, and evaluation. And basically, we're in the orange, the research phase, and I'm giving people a taster of one-to-one conversations. And these are conversations where we basically learn about each other and we learn about the core things that we value in our lives, which shape the decisions we've made and why we care about these issues. And the argument that I'm making is that if people invest time in building teams and having these conversations with people to learn about each other and what our deeper kind of motivations are and connections are, then that allows our teams to be strong enough, and it allows us to identify what the best issues to work on are. Because sometimes what we do is we've thought of an issue, or we've thought of an injustice that needs to be tackled, or we've come up with something kind of in our heads, and we try and preach to everybody that they should join our team, or we try and preach that people should take this thing really, really seriously. And we haven't taken the time to listen to find out whether that actually connects with them or what things they would like to take forward. And once you do that, then you're in a much stronger position to actually try and make some change. So that's what we've been doing. We've been having some of our own conversations, and that's the point. So maybe, I don't know if either of you would be up for, oh, Dylan, you've joined.
Dylan. Hi, yeah, sorry.
Dylan, I'm not in, sorry, Dylan, I'm not in control of the breakout groups, but I can see them, but Tom is, and he's in one of the groups. I can't get a message, but I can see that you and JJ, for some reason, were both in groups on your own.
Yes.
So you were kind of trapped on like either side of a wall, and everyone else is in pairs. So maybe what we could do is we could have like a quick bit of sharing together here
I can go.
So is anybody, Dylan or Liddy or JJ, do you want to share anything about, who you are?
I can share.
Yeah, go on,
Briefly.
JJ.
Yeah. So the first question, where I am from and who raised me. Well, I am from Warsaw, Poland, about 1100 miles away from here. I was raised in a multi-generational house with parents, grandparents, and cousins close to my childhood. And except for family, which were very important, I also value my teachers, whom I really miss sometimes because they showed me a little bit who I am and what can I do. And the experience that is very memorable. Oh, it's the end. Oh.
Oh, so you're all coming back. Well, it looks like people are coming back.
Faster. Yeah.
It's the first time 12 minutes felt like 1 minute.
Ah, that's interesting. So I'm getting the sense that people would have liked more time to continue their conversations. Are people generally feeling positive and uplifted by the conversations they're having? Are you learning something? Is this interesting? Good, right, okay. So this feeling that you have now, and look at all of these people smiling as you come back from these conversations, this energy, this positivity, this learning, right? You've literally just had a 12-minute short version of the conversations that I'm recommending that you have, right? Imagine if you had sort of 20 minutes more to really get into these things and really start connecting. The smiles would be even wider. The energy would be even higher. The connections that you have together would be stronger. And also you'd be in a better place to have a common interest to work together on making change, right? That's the purpose of these conversations. They build the relationships and strengthen the connections between people, but they also give you an insight into the types of issues that you should prioritize. Sometimes what we do, and I know that I've been guilty of this as much as the next person. I joined university as someone who really, really cared about climate change, who wanted to do lots of campaigning, and I would preach to people about CO2 emissions and the importance of divesting from fossil fuels and all these things. And I had so much energy and fervor, and I knew a lot about the issue. But all of this preaching and trying to tell people like, this is an important cause, you need to join me, like, wouldn't result in more people joining my cause. Some people would say, oh, that's really nice, or I really respect that you care about that, Tom, but that's not for me, or that's a great idea that you have a meeting to organize that thing. I just can't come along, I've got something else going on, so the preaching doesn't help, even if we are right, okay? And that's often because we haven't invested the time in building the relationships and the connections, and we're starting with issues that kind of have popped into our head or that we've read in a book. And we're not starting with the issues or the concerns that have come out of these sorts of conversations that really deeply connect with people. And the reality is that this issue of decolonization, is broad and big and complicated, and there are 1,000,001 ways that you could all be tackling it. And so I suggest that the way that you try and tackle it is to focus on those things that really resonate with people deeply, because they will act based on them. And the way that you will know that is by having these conversations as much as possible. And those of you who are leaders in your students' union or who are course reps or sabbatical officers, we strongly encourage you to embed this as a daily practice in your work. So alongside all the emails you've got to do, and alongside all the meetings that you've got to go to and the reports that you do and everything else like that, take some time to have these sorts of conversations regularly with the students that you work with or the people in your community. And it will leave you in a much stronger place for your campaigns. So that's why we do these conversations. But people felt good doing them. You felt positive. Yeah? Okay, right. So your challenge is to do this more. I don't have time to get into it in much more detail than that, but you can do more training in how to have these conversations, the best kind of questions to ask, how you deal with challenges and tension and difficulties. We can support you and train you in more of those things in depth. But this is only a taster, so I have to move on to the next phase. So this is all about the research phase, learning about the world, building our relationships, strengthening ourselves before we get into trying to make change. But when we get to the point where we really do have an issue. We've had conversations with people. We understand what the issue is. We've got our group of people who are connected and know each other, who care and who want to work and take action. You need to start taking some action. And so what I want to do now for phase 2 is introduce some simple principles around action. And then I'm going to give you the opportunity to dream and to come up with an action yourself which fits with these principles. So action, again, is another piece of community organizing jargon. Essentially, all it means is it's an event or an activity which is designed to get a decision maker to do something. That's all it is. It's just the event or the activity, right? I'm not defining what that event looks like, what the activity is, you know, that comes later, but it's just a word to describe that kind of event and activity that's designed to kind of help us make change. And the key thing is what's at the top of this slide. The action is in the reaction. So the value of the action that you do, and it can look however you want it, the value of it comes from it securing a specific reaction from the person that you are targeting. That's where the value of the action comes. So the best way to approach taking action is to start with the reaction and to build backwards. And so my top tip is that you write down the desired reaction that you want as a clear statement or thought that you can imagine your target saying or thinking after you've done your action. So literally write down a sentence which maybe goes, I must meet with the University of Birmingham Decolonization Group. It is vital that Sheffield Students' Union are invited to the meeting where we make the decision on this issue. There is no way that I can include a reading list which doesn't have any Black authors in. You know, literally write out that sentence, the reaction that you want the decision maker to have first. That's your first thing. Then you need to consider these 6 things and how you can use these 6 things to build your action. And think of them almost as a checklist. Top of the checklist is turnout. This is the most important thing for you to think about, and it should be what takes up most of your time when you're planning your action. Turnout is the number of people who physically attend or participate in the action. The larger the number of people you turn out to your action, the more likely it is to be successful, because your turnout is a demonstration of the power that you have. Your power comes from organized people who are committed to the change that you're looking for. And you need to demonstrate that to the decision maker in the clearest way possible. And if you're not capable of turning out people, then your cause might be righteous, your cause might be just, but there is very little pressure on the decision maker to do anything about it. So if your action is a physical gathering, you need to literally think about how many people need to be physically gathered in order to generate the reaction that you're looking for. And for bigger issues or higher profile decision makers, that number is necessarily going to be bigger. So 5 people who turn up for something might be enough to get 1 person at the university to a meeting or to consider what you're looking for. But for the vice chancellor, it might need to be 50 or 100, you know? So we recommend that you set, after you've defined what your action is, you set a turnout target and you write that number down, and everybody needs to understand what that number is. And you build an action which is going to guarantee that number of people turning out. And that number has to relate to the reaction that you need, and be honest and realistic about it. The next thing to think about is testimony. So an action is a great opportunity to bring the reality of your issue or the injustice that you are facing direct to the decision makers. And personal testimony of some form is vital for this, and all great actions do this. Often we tend to rely on statistics and sometimes even academic theory to justify what we are doing, because that kind of makes rational sense. And there's an extent to which you will need that, and you will get into conversations about that. But we have found in our experience that the most powerful thing in terms of getting reactions and in terms of shifting decision makers is the lived reality of people who are experiencing the injustice. And that being shared, ideally by those people directly, face to face with the decision maker in some way. So your action should include some element of personal testimony, where you are bringing the lived experiences of people direct to the decision maker. Now that could be literally somebody who's experiencing the injustice, talking about their experience of it, what happens to them. You might do it in a slightly different way, in a slightly more creative way. It could be something visual, where you are sharing the stories in a visual way or in a physical way through art or through posters or whatever it is. But in some way, you need to bring that testimony to the decision maker. And that is more important often than sort of other forms of evidence, because it's a thing that generates and provokes a reaction. The third thing is confrontation. Often we run actions and we try and make change in ways where we are doing something really interesting and exciting and valuable over here, and the decision maker who has something, who actually has the influence over the issue, is over here, and the two don't see each other, the two don't meet, they're not in contact, there's no confrontation, and that is basically a waste of time. I was really guilty of this when I was a student union officer. I remember one action that we ran around the issue of tuition fees, actually, which involved, amongst other things, a big march through the city of Cambridge. And there was brilliant chanting, no ifs, no buts, no education cuts. We had all these people surrounding us. And we had this point where we basically marched through the streets of Cambridge, and nobody who was making any of the decisions about the tuition fees at Cambridge saw any of the march. In fact, we had one ridiculous bit where we went, I think, 7 times around the market square chanting, because we needed to wait for the police to shut down the next road for us to march along. And we spent all that time marching around, no ifs, no buts, no education cuts, around the market square. And I suppose, I don't know, the market stall holders and the shoppers got to hear this chant, and maybe they enjoyed it, maybe they were just annoyed that we were chanting at them and shouting at them, and we were throwing all of this energy and this anger at the wrong people. Nobody who had any influence over that decision was running a market stall that day. They were all working in the Senate House. So it was a really terrible decision for me to do this march, which didn't actually in any way bring the reality of the situation, the energy, the creativity of the students, the injustice, but it didn't come face to face with the decision maker in any meaningful way. So that was a mistake. So try and make your action actually connect with and confront the decision maker. The fourth tip is to personalize and polarize. Again, this is a piece of jargon, but essentially what it means is you need to be really clear and simple and straightforward with your ask. It needs to be directed to a specific individual. So that's what I mean by personalize. So it's not the government or the council or the English department or the committee. It's a specific named individual who has some power and responsibility, and you need to call them out by name and challenge them to act or to make the decision that you want. And by polarize, I mean you need to make it really clear and simple and straightforward. Is it a yes or a no? Are you going to do it or are you not going to do it? Because sometimes you get into these conversations where you have a righteous cause and it gets complicated or problematized. Oh yes, decolonizing the curriculum. Yeah, that's a really interesting and exciting issue. You know, there are so many different factors to consider when it comes to decolonization. You know, there's all sorts of things to do with the curriculum and the relationship with students and the relationship with the academy. And, you know, it's so complex. So yes, I really value what you're saying, and we're going to continue this conversation and get into these issues. And maybe you want to come to a seminar where we talk about these issues a bit more, and maybe you can give a presentation and we'll reflect on your views. And that's lovely, but is not helpful for you getting the decision on the thing that you want, right? So polarizing and getting it down to the point where it's a yes or a no, really, really, really clear is vital. Fifth tip, getting a reaction works better when your action is focused, brief, and fun. Saul Alinsky, who's kind of like a godfather of community organizing, talks about how an action that goes on too long becomes a drag. And we fall into that trap far too often because we encourage people to go to meetings that are boring and take too long, or go on marches that take ages, Your action does not need to take an hour or 2 hours in order to achieve its aim. It can be focused, fun, and brief, and very, very specific. And actually, if you can make it focused, fun, and brief, it's more likely that the student who isn't necessarily really politically active, who doesn't necessarily know lots about decolonizing the curriculum, who hasn't been a student union hack for all their life, is likely to come back next time because it was focused, fun, and brief. They didn't waste their whole afternoon doing something that was a drag. So thinking about how you can make your actions very, very brief is vital. It could literally take seconds if that's all it takes to get the reaction. And then the final thing is media. Media can be really helpful for your actions, partly because it produces additional pressure on the decision maker to give a clear answer, but also because you might get the response you need. You might get a yes to your ask. And the presence of media or the involvement of media ensures that that decision is made public, which ensures that the person can be held to account on that decision. Whereas if you have a quiet meeting or behind closed doors and you get a yes, and then you go home satisfied, and then 2 weeks later, the university reneges on their promise, or they don't quite deliver, or it's not clear that they're actually going to follow through, it's really hard to call them up on it if it hasn't been made public in some way. And it's really, really hard to get an assembly where every single student is present. And so the media can be really helpful for publicizing and making clear the commitments that have been made. If you're willing to take action in this way, it's been observed that action is to our organizations as oxygen is to the body. So by that, we mean that this stuff brings life to your campaign and to your organization. The more you can get into the space where you are doing this, and not just researching the problem or writing papers, the more life it brings to your organization, in the same way that breathing obviously brings us life. But also, it means that action is oxygen because you get oxygen by breathing every second, every day, constantly. And most of the time, unless you're ill, you don't make a big deal out of it. It's just something that's habitual. And our students' unions need to be in the habit of doing actions regularly. This should be a thing that you just do all the time, regularly, and you get into a habit of doing it. And you don't necessarily need to make a big deal out of it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the flashiest thing in the world. It just needs to be thought through, designed around getting a reaction. And it could be a really small reaction, but it's better to do this regularly than to not. When I was a student union officer, we used to sort of build up to these big, massive demonstrations, and we'd spend weeks and weeks and weeks trying to channel our efforts into 1 or 2 big set piece actions. And I think that's less productive than doing actions regularly. Sometimes it might be with smaller numbers, sometimes it might be focused on smaller things, but building that habit brings life to your organization because it creates opportunities for people to participate and join in and to get a taste of making change in their own agency. So that's why action is to our organizations as oxygen is to the body. So those are some principles that I've just kind of thrown at you and a kind of checklist for you to work through as you are designing the event or the activity that you're going to use to try and push the decision maker to do something. Now I want you in your groups to think about that in a more imaginative and practical way. We're going to divide into groups and we're going to reflect on this scenario. So I'd like you to kind of take a moment and imagine that in your group, you are all part of a team at the world-renowned Fibchester University. And the issue here is that Fibchester have proposed an English literature course reading list for next year, but there are no Black authors on this reading list. And some students did complain and course reps did write to the department and they requested a meeting with the head of the department. But so far, the head of the department, Professor John Ford, he's refused their request. So he's not organised a meeting with the student representatives. Now, he's going to a teaching and learning committee meeting next Friday, where that's the moment where he's going to kind of formally present the course materials and start making plans for the next semester. So I would like you in your groups to plan a public action. And that action's purpose is to try and get Professor Ford to agree to meet with you. Okay? So Tom, can you divide us up into 5 groups? And if you could separate me and the other Citizens UK staff, so hopefully so that there's at least one member of Citizens UK in each group to support you. In your groups, I'd just like you to brainstorm and dream and come up with a vivid, interesting, exciting action And as you do it, I encourage you to think about that checklist, you know, what the desired reaction is, how you're going to get as a big turnout as possible, how you can bring testimony and confrontation to it, how will you personalize and polarize this issue? Can you make this action fun, focused, and brief? And is there a way to involve media? Does that make sense? People cool with that? Okay, so Tom, over to you. If you can divide us into groups, everybody join the room that you've been invited to, and it'd be really interesting to see what actions you can come up with. And we're going to spend about 15 minutes on this. Hello, everyone. I think that's everyone back. Saeed, I can see you. Amina, Ali, Tom, I can't see. There we go. All right then. So I hope these conversations are interesting and creative, and these this checklist that I've given you helped you come up with some interesting ideas. I'm going to very quickly run around the groups, and we don't have much time, so I literally want a sentence to summarize. It might be quite hard to do it in a sentence, but a sentence to summarize the plan as it stands, or the creative thing, the activity or the event that your group considered putting on to address this issue of the head of the English department not meeting with us to discuss putting Black authors on the reading list. I want to start with Ali. Can you tell us what your group was up to?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Yeah, our group had some fantastic conversations about the action that they would do along the lines of getting into wheelbarrows full of a list of different texts from Black readers, from Black writers. So get wheelbarrows full, and taking it and presenting it to the professor, and also calling on students and teachers who might be supportive, the teachers who are going to be teaching this particular piece, who might be supportive of this, to also turn out and have banners with the alternative reading list presented.
Nice.
So there's some real excitement about presenting this and bringing people out and having them give testimony, have the actual teachers who are supportive of this and the students also give testimony. So there was a combination whether to do it on the actual Friday, which is again a postponement of the actual delivery of that, or doing it on a Thursday and potentially cancelling Friday completely. They also, in terms of the media, they thought there was.
Ali, I'm going to stop you just because we're running out of time. But it sounds really creative. I like the idea of the wheelbarrows and the actual alternative reading list being typed up. Amina, just in a few seconds, anything that your group wanted to do that was different or interesting?
So we were talking about going outside of the VC's office and putting like an eviction notice style thing on his door saying like, why is our curriculum so white? And then having a possible Shakespearean style monologue about why this is so important, and then presenting an alternative reading list to the VC.
Okay, that's really interesting. I had this, when you said the eviction style notice, it's October and 500 years ago, it was the Reformation. So I've got this image of like almost like Martin Luther, like nailing his 95 theses to the door with that. That's fascinating. Okay, Saeed, any other ideas from your group?
We went through the list and really thinking about the politics of the action and like what would work, and not having a big rally, but a build up on social media and thinking about a wider group of allies who turn up. And the request is a meeting, isn't it? So the request is for a meeting. And basically, so the idea of very significant people in the turnout, not 500, but perhaps a good number, it's a bit embarrassing that very busy people have turned up just to ask you for a meeting with the students and you can't meet. So like having a local vicar, having other lecturers, all there, it's a bit embarrassing. They've made time to come to your teaching learning committee for a meeting and you can't meet the students about this crucial issue. So that was one thing, but the good thing is we had Toby, and all of us were UOB, and we're hoping one of the best things that doesn't always happen lots of conferences, but delighted that it happens from this. We want to meet up after the conference and pick this up.
Good. So there's an actual real life action that could happen in Birmingham. That's excellent.
By the way, that Chichester University was in Birmingham, and Professor John Ford doesn't exist at university, in case everyone wants to tweet.
Oh yeah. Obviously, Chichester is a made up.
You don't want that scenario picking up on Brum for no reason.
Back in my day, Fibchester used to be like the default NUS fictional university. So that's why I chose that name. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it literally is. It's made up. I haven't based it on anyone. My group, I really enjoyed the conversation in the group I was part of. We decided to identify a specific Black author that needs to be added to the list. We were going to get somebody to either that author themselves or somebody to dress up as that author. We were going to basically hold a public lecture on the steps of the department building that lots of students are going to attend, having marched with the author from the Students' Union to the English department. They'll give a public lecture on their issue. And also smaller teams of students in the week leading up to that meeting are going to take responsibility for inviting the members of that committee to come to the public lecture that's being held before that meeting and to support us when they're in the room with the head of department as well. We got into lots of creative conversations about how we can use that turnout and generate leadership and activism amongst the student body. It was really exciting. So I hope you can see, even just from trying it for a few minutes, how thinking about action in those terms frees you up and allows you to be creative and productive and more likely to achieve change. And we are not just taking old actions off the shelf and applying them to our situation or doing the thing that people did last year because that's the thing that you do when you complain about something. We're really focused and intentional about how we use our turnout. So before I leave, I just want to remind people that's the cycle that we're in, and by following these principles, we are building relationships, leadership, and power within our organisation, and that's the real added value in taking this approach, alongside obviously making change. The final step in that cycle is evaluation, and that's about an honest assessment of our success and failure. And too often, our organisations, and I think student unions are often guilty of this, skip this step. So we often just like do an action, put on an event, do some research, and we don't really take into account like how far it helped us achieve our aims or not. Or if we do, we often turn evaluation into a bureaucratic exercise or an elite exercise. So we make it a thing that a minority of people within the group do, just the organisers sit down together and think about what happened, or we get people to fill in forms and tick boxes and send it in to somebody centrally who holds all the information and the learning. And in community organising with citizens, we are very radical and we just basically rip up that process. And we do something very different. We do public evaluations. So at the end of every single meeting that we do in Citizens, whether it's a big action like the one we've been planning, or even if it's just like a planning meeting for an event or an action team, we do a public evaluation where at the end we take 5 minutes to ask everybody their views. And generally we settle on 6 categories. We ask people how they felt. And we get you to do that by naming a word, an adjective that describes literally how you are feeling right now. This is probably going to be the most important thing that determines your participation next time, whether you're going to join the campaign, whether you're going to come to the next meeting or the next event. And if your feelings aren't good, they need to be addressed, and we need to think about how we respond and improve for next time. And too often that is not taken seriously. Then we look at the logistics. So how well were people prepared? Did you get the right paperwork? Were we on time? All that kind of stuff. Could you see? Little things like that can get in the way of people experiencing our actions and our meetings well. The third thing is turnout. We will get the number that we planned for, and we will count heads and determine whether we met the target turnout or not. And we are very open about it. And if we've done well, we should highlight the people and the organisations that contributed towards making that turnout work. And if we didn't do well and we didn't get the number of people that we needed, we will think about what we need to do next time to ensure that we do. We might discuss some highlights or lowlights from the action, or whether we got the reaction that we wanted from the decision maker, how it went down, depending on what happened. We'll take some moment to think about leadership development, and a good metric to use is the number of people who are attending the meeting or the action for the first time, or the number of people who've done something for the first time in the process of the event. So it could be that this is the first time I've ever spoken publicly at a thing with academics, or this is the first time I took responsibility for bringing 3 people along to this action, or this is the first time that I've attended a march or a protest. Those sorts of things are opportunities for people to develop as leaders, and they need to be recognized and valued in the room. And then the final thing we do, so that everybody understands how well we've done, is we assign the meeting a grade. and you can use 1 to 10, or you could do new school GCSEs of like, what is it, 1 to 9, or you can do A to B or whatever, but have a simple way to capture how well you did. And I like to do A, this was awesome, we achieved everything we wanted, to F, this was a complete failure, we're less powerful, and give everyone the chance to say what grade they'd like to give the event or the action. And you have something to work with. So that's basically the key thing. I'm going to stop sharing here. We're basically running out of time, but I wonder whether we could take that seriously, what I've just said about evaluation, and whether people in the chat could help us to evaluate this meeting, this training session that you just had. So you've given up an hour and a half to be here, learn about community organising. And yeah, let's evaluate and see how well we've done. So could you, in the chat, put down one word that describes how you are feeling, like your emotion? I don't want like a deep analysis of the content, like literally how you are feeling right now. I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling energized, you know. Put that word down. And I'd also like you to put down one highlight and one low light, or maybe one thing that you think should improve. That makes sense. If you could just put that in the chat, that would be really helpful. So Toby's feeling motivated, that's good. Shivani's feeling supported, invigorated, motivated, positive, great, encouraged, curious, encouraged, inspired. Jocelyn really enjoyed the one-to-one conversations. Highlight was coming up with an action for Tom. He's feeling energized. Laurie's feeling inspired and a feeling of community. That's great. Dylan's feeling engaged. Louise is feeling engaged. And the skills in the one-to-one exercise were good. That's a good point, Louise. More time. I would have appreciated more time, and I felt a bit rushed as well. Good to have structure. Understand that engagement should be more intentional rather than on the surface. Creating activity, good. So this is good. People, so you can see, like, we're doing this really, really quickly. And if we were doing this in person, we'd spend time talking about these things. But this is about you guys all taking responsibility and having ownership for what we're doing together. And that's the spirit that you want to encourage in community organising through your campaigns. So everybody taking some responsibility for evaluation is good. And low lights, yeah, being hungry, fair enough. I feel a bit hungry too, actually, Toby. Yeah. Then the final thing, a grade. So if you can just take a moment in the chat to put your grade, and anything from A to F. Oh, right, people are doing numbers. Okay, maybe it's 1 to 10. Is that what people? So Louise has done 9. Okay, so maybe 10 is good and 1 is bad, and just put in your opinion what number you'd assign this session. Okay, I'm seeing some 8s, some 9s, or a couple of 10s. Good, some 9s. Okay, so this helps us gauge like what we've delivered and whether we would need to change it if we do this again, and it helps us all grow. So this looks pretty positive. I think the average is, I've not seen Spinal Tap, but I'm guessing 11 is a good thing. Okay, others get the joke. All right, so I think our average is about 9. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming along. It's been great to share these things with you. And I hope the rest of the conference goes well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom, and all the people from Citizens UK. These sessions have been really, really useful. Yeah, please, if you found this stuff interesting, check out Citizens UK's Thursday evening online training sessions. I've been going along to them, they're really good. Our next session of the conference is with a group called Don't Settle, and that's at 12. See you there, guys. Bye.